The 13th Candle by Tuesday Love Sang Rampa, read for you by BlueFriend in beautiful BC. Chapter 2. Timon, Timon! The voice was shrill, fear-laden, with that rasping intonation which jars one and sets the nerves on edge. Timon, wake up! Your father is dying. Slowly the young boy swam back from the depths of utter unconsciousness. Slowly he struggled through the fogs of sleep, trying to open leaden eyelids. Timon, you must wake up! Your father is dying! A hand grasped his hair and shook him violently. Timon opened his eyes. Suddenly he became aware of a strange rasping noise, like a strangling yak, he thought. Curiously, he sat up and swiveled his head around, striving to see through the gloom of the small room. On a ledge stood a stone dish in which a lump of butter floated in its own turgid melted oil. Roughly thrust into the unmelted butter, a strip of coarse cloth acted as a crude wick. Now it sputtered, flared, and dimmed, throwing flickering shadows on the wall behind it. A vagrant draught caused the wick to dip momentarily. It sputtered and spat, and the feeble flames became even dimmer. Then, saturated afresh by its partial immersion, it flared anew, sending smoky fingers of soot across the room. "Timon, your father is dying! You must hurry for the llama!" cried his mother in desperation. Slowly, still drugged with sleep, Timon rose to his reluctant feet and drew his solitary garment around him. The rasping noise quickened, slowed, and resumed its monotonous, chilling rhythm. Timon drew near the huddled bundle at the side of which crouched his mother. Staring down with fear-filled eyes, he felt numb horror at the sight of his father's face, made even more ghastly by the flickering butter lamp. Blue he was, blue with a hard, cold look about him, blue with the onset of cardiac failure, tense with the signs of rigor mortis even while he yet lived. "Timon," said his mother, "you must go for the llama, or your father will die with no one to guide him. Hurry, hurry!" Whirling about, Timon dashed for the door. Outside, the stars gleamed hard and cold in the darkness which comes before the dawn, and when man is most prone to fail and falter. The bitter wind, chilled by the fog banks, as he strove to peer through the darkness, a darkness but poorly relieved by the faint star-glow. No moon here. This was the wrong time of the month. The mountains stood hard and black, with only the faintest of purpling to show where they ended and the sky began. From the point where a vague purple smudge swept down to the faintly glowing river, a minute speck of wavering yellow light shone the brighter because of the all-pervading darkness. Quickly the boy jumped into motion, running, jumping, hurdling fallen rocks in his overpowering anxiety to reach the sanctuary of that light. Cruel flints slithered and stung beneath his unshod feet. Round pebbles, remnants perhaps from some ancient seabed, moved treacherously at his footsteps. Boulders loomed alarmingly through the blackness of the pre-dawn morning, and bruised him as he grazed against them in his fear-inspired flight. The feeble light in the distance beckoned. Behind him his father lay dying, with no Lama to guide his soul's faltering steps. He sped on. Soon his breath was coming in rasping gasps in the thin mountain air. Soon his side ached with the agony of the stitch, which afflicts those who strive too much in running. The pain became a searing overtone to his life. Retching and sobbing as he strove to get more air, he was compelled to slow his race to a fast trot, and then, for a few steps, to a limping walk. The light beckoned, a beacon of hope in an ocean of hopelessness. What would become of them now, he wondered. How would they live? How would they eat? Who would look after them and protect them? His heart throbbed violently until he feared that it might burst forth from his heaving chest. Perspiration poured down him to quickly turn chill in the frigid air. His solitary garment was tattered, faded, and scant protection against the elements. They were poor, desperately poor, and likely to become even more so with the loss of the father, the wage earner. The light beckoned on, a refuge in an ocean of fear. Beckoned on, flickered, burned low, and rose again as if to remind the lonely boy that his father's life was flickering low, but would become bright again beyond the confines of this hard world. He burst into frenzied motion again, tucking his elbows into his sides, running with his mouth wide open, exerting every muscle to save the fleeting seconds. The light became larger, like a star welcoming him home. By his side the happy river flowed, chuckling as it made sport with the small stones it had pushed from the mountainous heights which gave it birth. The river glowed dull silver in the faint starlight. Ahead of him the boy could now faintly discern the blacker bulk of a small lamasery perched between the river and the mountain side. Looking at the light and the river, his attention was distracted, and an ankle gave way beneath him, throwing him violently to the ground, skinning hands, knees, and face. Sobbing with pain and frustration, he climbed painfully to his feet, and he hobbled on. Suddenly, just in front of him, a figure appeared. "Who is abroad around our walls?" asked a deep old voice. "Ah, and what brings you to our door at this hour of the morning?" the voice continued. Timon, peering through tear-swollen eyelids, saw a bent old monk before him. "Oh, you are hurt. Come inside, and I will see to you," the voice went on. Slowly the old man turned and led the way back into the small lamasery. Timon stood blinking in the sudden light of some small butter lamp, bright indeed after the darkness outside. The air was heavy with the scent of incense. Timon stood tongue-tied for a moment, and then poured out his message. "My father, he is dying, and my mother sent me fast to bring aid, that he may be guided on his journey. He is dying." The poor boy sank to the floor, covered his weeping eyes with his hands. The old monk shuffled out, and soon might have been heard in whispered conversation in another room. Timon sat up on the floor, weeping in an ecstasy of self-pity and fright. Soon he was roused by a fresh voice saying, "My son, my son." "Ah, it is young Timon. Yes, I know you, my boy." Timon respectfully bowed and then slowly climbed to his feet, wiping his eyes with the corner of his robe and so smearing moist roadside dust all over his tear-wet face. "Tell me, my boy," said the Lama, for that was whom Timon recognized him to be. Once again Timon told his tale, and at its completion the Lama said, "Come, we will go together. I will lend you a pony. First drink this tea and eat this sampa, for you must be famished, and the day will be long and tiring." The old monk came forward with the food, and Timon sat upon the floor to consume it, while the Lama went away to make his preparations. There came the sound of horses, and the Lama entered the room again. "Ah, so you have finished. Good, then let us be on our way." And he turned, leaving Timon to follow him. Now, over the far edge of the mountain girding the plain of Lhasa was the first faint golden streaks of light, heralding the birth of a new day. Suddenly a glint of light shone through a high mountain pass, and for a moment touched the house of Timon's parents at the far end of the road. "Even the day dies, my boy," said the Lama, "but in a few hours it is reborn as a new day. And so it is with all living things." 3 ponies stood restlessly at the door in the very insecure care of an acolyte scarce older than Timon. "We have to ride these things," the young acolyte whispered to Timon. "Put your hands over his eyes if he won't stop. And," he added gloomily, "if that doesn't stop him, jump for it." Quickly the Lama mounted. The young acolyte gave Timon a hand, and then, with the leap of desperation, jumped on his own horse and rode off after the other 2, now fading into the darkness that yet covered the land. Golden shafts of light spread across the mountain tops as the sun showed its topmost edge over the eastern rise. Frozen moisture in the frigid air reflected a myriad of colors and shades of colors from the prisms of ice. Giant shadows raced across the land as the shades of night were pushed aside by the relentlessly approaching day. The 3 lonely travelers, mere specks of dirt in the immensity of the barren land, rode on through the boulder-strewn countryside, evading the rockfalls and pits the more easily for the increasing light. Soon there could be seen a lonely figure standing at the side of the desolate house, a woman shading her eyes, peering in anguish along the path, hoping for the help that seemed so long in coming. The 3 rode on, picking a careful way amid the rock debris. "I do not know how you manage so well, boy," said the Lama to Timon. "It must have been a frightening journey." But poor Timon was too frightened and too tired to answer. Even now he swayed and drowsed on the back of the pony. The 3 rode on in silence. At the door the woman stood, wringing her hands and bobbing her head in a half-abashed gesture of respect. The Lama swung off his horse and went to the sorrowing woman. The young acolyte slithered off his pony and went to the aid of Timon, but too late. That young man had just toppled off as soon as the pony stopped. "Holy Lama, quavered the woman. "My husband is almost gone. I have kept him conscious, but I feared you would be too late. Oh, what shall we do?" "Come, show me the way," commanded the Lama, following the woman as she turned and led the way in. The house was dark. Oiled cloth covered the holes in the walls, for there was no glass here, and well-oiled cloth brought from distant India served in its place, admitting a strange kind of light and a peculiar fragrance all of its own. A fragrance composed of drawing out oil well mixed with soot from the ever-smouldering butter lamp. The floor was of well-pounded earth, and the walls were composed of heavy stones compacted together, with gaps stopped by yak dung. A small fire, the fuel of which was also yak dung, smouldered in the center of the room, and the smoke drifted up, and some of it eventually escaped through a hole in the roof constructed for that purpose. By the side of the far wall opposite the entrance there lay a bundle, which at first glance might have been taken for a bundle of rags tossed aside, but the illusion was dispelled by the sounds which came from the bundle. The rasping, croaking sounds of a man struggling to keep the breath within his body. The sounds of a man in extremis. The Lama moved towards him and peered through the all-pervading gloom at the one who was lying on the floor. An elderly, thin man, stamped with the hardship of life, a man who had lived according to all the beliefs of his ancestors without having a thought of things for himself. Now he lay there gasping, blue-faced through the lack of oxygen. He lay there sobbing out his life, striving to retain some tenuous consciousness, for his belief, and traditional belief, was that his journey to the other world would be the easier for the guidance of a trained Lama. He looked up, and some semblance, some fleeting look of pleasure flitted across his ghastly features at the realization that now the Lama was here. The Lama sank down beside the dying man and placed his hands upon his temples, uttering soothing sounds to him. Behind him the young acolyte hurriedly set out incense burners and took some incense from a package. Then, taking from his pouch tinder, flint, and iron, he industriously set spark to tinder and blew it into flame so that the incense could be lighted when required. Not for him the easier, disrespectful system of touching the incense to the now guttering butter lamp. That would have shown lack of thought for the incense and lack of respect for the ritual. He was going to light the incense in the traditional way, for he, that eager young man, had great ambitions of being a Lama himself. The Lama, sitting in the lotus position beside the almost moribund man on the floor, nodded to the acolyte, who then lit the first stick of incense, lit it so that the flame just touched the tip of the first stick, and then, as it glowed red, blew it out, leaving the stick to smolder. The Lama moved his hand slightly to a different position on the man's head and said, "O spirit about to depart from its case of flesh, we light the first stick of incense, that your attention may be attracted, that you may be guided, that you may take an easy path through the perils which your undirected imagination will place before you." There was a strange peace apparent on the dying man's face. Now it was bedewed with perspiration, a thin sheen of moisture, the perspiration of approaching death. The Lama gripped his head firmly and nodded slightly to the acolyte. That young man bent forward again and lit the second stick of incense, blew out the flame, leaving the second stick of incense to smoulder. O spirit about to depart for the greater reality, the true life beyond this, your time of release has come. Be prepared to keep your consciousness fixed firmly upon me, even when you leave this, your present body, for I have much to tell you. Pay attention. The Lama moved forward again and placed his interlocked fingers on the very top of the man's head. The dying man's stertorous breathing sounded rattly, raggedy. His chest heaved and fell. Suddenly he gave a short, sharp gasp, almost a cough, and his body arched upwards until it was supported by the back of his heel and his head. For what seemed to be an interminable time, he stayed thus, a rigid bow of flesh and bone. Then, all of a sudden, the body jerked upwards so that it was perhaps an inch, perhaps 2 inches from the ground. Then it collapsed, sagged like a half-empty sack of wheat thrown carelessly aside. A last despairing wheeze of air escaped from the lungs. The body twitched and was still. But from within there came the gurgle of fluids, the rumbling of organs, and the settling of joints. The Lama nodded again to the acolyte, who, waiting, immediately touched flame to the third stick of incense and set it to smoulder with flame extinguished in the third incense holder. Spirit now released from the suffering body, pay attention before setting out on your journey. Pay attention, for by your faulty knowledge, your faulty imagination, you have set snares which can impede the comfort of this your journey. Pay attention, for I shall detail to you the steps you must take and the path you must follow. Pay attention. Outside the small room, the morning wind was rising as the poor heat of the sun's rays, dipping over the mountain edge, started to disturb the cold of the long night, and with the first rays of even that faint warmth, air currents rose up from the cold ground and disturbed little eddies of dust, which now swirled and rattled against the oiled cloth openings of the room, until it sounded, to the frightened woman watching from the doorway, almost as if devils were rattling and trying to get at her husband, now lying dead before her. She thought of the enormity of it. One moment she was married to a living man, a man who, for years, had provided for her, a man who had assured such security as there ever could be in her life. But at the next moment he was dead, lying dead before her on the earth floor of their room. She wondered what would become of her now. Now she had nothing but a son who was too young to work, too young to earn, and she suffering from a sickness which sometimes came upon women who were denied assistance at the time of their child's birth. She had dragged herself around for the whole number of years of her son's age. The Lama kneeling beside the body on the floor, closed the eyes of the corpse and placed little pebbles on the shut lids to keep them closed. He put a band under the chin and tied it at the top of the head to keep the sagging jaw tight so that the mouth could be shut. Then, at a signal from him, the fourth stick of incense was lit and placed carefully in its holder. Now there were 4 sticks of incense, and the smoke from them trailed upwards almost as if they had been drawn in blue-gray chalk. So straight were the pillars of smoke in the almost airless room, without a draught. The Lama spoke again. O departed spirit of the body before us, the 4th stick of incense has been lit to draw your attention and to hold you here while I talk, while I tell you of that which you will find. O spirit about to wander, heed my words, that your wanderings may be directed. The Lama looked sadly at the corpse, thinking of the training that he'd had. He was telepathic, clairaudient. He could see the aura of the human body, that strange, colored, multicolored flame which swirled and wove about a living body. Now, as he looked at the dead body, he could see that the flame was almost extinguished. There was, instead of the colors of the rainbow and many more besides, just an eddying gray-blue turning darker. But streaming from the body, the gray-blue moved upwards to about 2 feet above the corpse. There was active motion, violent motion. It looked like many fireflies darting about. Fireflies who had been trained as soldiers and who were endeavoring to find their preordained places. The little particles of light moved, swirled and interwove, and before the Lama's eyes, before his 3rd eye, there appeared soon a replica of the corpse, but as a living man, a young man. It was tenuous as yet, floating naked about 2 feet above the body. It rose and fell, perhaps 2 or 3 inches at a time. It rose and fell, regained its position, fell and rose, and all the time the details were becoming more clear. The filmy body was filling out and becoming more substantial. The Lama sat and waited while the grayish-blue light of the dead body became dimmer, but while the multicolored light composing the body above became stronger, more substantial, more vivid. At last there was a sudden swelling and a jerk, and the ghost body tipped with its head up and its feet down. The very slight joining between the dead flesh and the living spirit parted, and the spirit was now complete and living, independent of its former host body. Immediately there came into that little room the odor of death, the strange, spicy odor of a body starting to decay, an unpleasant odor which rather stung the nostrils high up between the eyes. The young acolyte, sitting behind the smoldering sticks of incense, carefully rose to his feet and went to the open door. Bowing ceremoniously to the new widow and her son Timon, he gently ushered them out of the room and shut the door firmly. Standing with his back to the door, he paused a moment to utter, whispering to himself, "Phew, what a smell!" Softly he moved the oilcloth covering the window opening and eased away one corner to let in fresh air. A whole torrent of wind-blown sand poured in and left him sputtering and coughing. "Shut that window," said the Lama, in subdued but still ferocious tones. Peering through almost closed eyes, the acolyte fumbled blindly at the now flapping cloth and managed to wedge it over the frame again. "Well, at least I got a breath of fresh air better than this stink," he thought to himself, before returning to his place and resuming his seat again behind the 4 sticks of smoking incense. The body lay inert upon the floor. From it there came the gurgling of fluids ceasing their flow and finding their own levels. There came, too, the rumbling and groaning of organs giving up life, for a body does not die on the instant, but in stages, organ by organ. First is the death of the higher centers of the brain, and then, in orderly procession, other organs, finally deprived at the direction of the brain, cease to function, cease to produce those secretions, or pass on the substance which is necessary for the continuation of that complex mechanism referred to as a body. As the life force withdraws, it leaves the confines of the body and assembles outside, congregating in an amorphous mass just above the body. It hovers by magnetic attraction while there is yet some life, while there is yet some flow of life particles departing from their former host. In time, as more and more organs give up their life force, the tenuous form floating above the flesh body comes more and more to resemble it. At last, when the resemblance was complete, the magnetic attraction would have ceased and the spirit body would float off on its next journey. Now the spirit was complete, and held to the dead body by only the most fragile of threads. It floated, and the spirit itself was confused and terrified. Being born to life on the earth was a traumatic experience, and that meant dying to another form of existence. Dying on earth meant that the spirit body was being born again on another world, on the spirit world, or one of them. Now the form hovered, floated higher and sank lower, floated and awaited the instruction of the telepathic Lama, one whose whole life was devoted to helping those who were leaving Earth. The Lama watched carefully, using his telepathic senses to assess the capacity of the newly released spirit and his third eye to actually view its form. At last, he broke the silence with telepathic instruction. "O newly released spirit," said the Lama, "pay attention to my thoughts, that your passage may be eased thereby. Heed the instructions which I shall give, that your path may be smoothed, for millions have trod this path before you, and million more will follow." The floating entity, so recently a fairly alert man of the earth, stirred slightly. A dim greenish hue suffused its being. A faint ripple ran its whole length, and then it subsided again into inertia. But there was an awareness, although ill-defined, that this entity was now on the brink of awakening from the coma of translation from death on earth to birth in the spirit plane. The Lama watched, studying, assessing, estimating. At last he spoke telepathically again, saying, "O Spirit, newly liberated from the bonds of the flesh, hear me. A fifth stick of incense is lit to attract your wandering attention, that you may be guided." The young acolyte had been brooding on the problem of how to get out and play. This was his ideal kite-flying weather. Others were out, why not he? Why had he... But now he jumped to attention and hastily lit that fifth stick of incense, blowing out the flame with such energy that the red glowing stick promptly burst into flame again. The smoke wafted upwards and wove tenuous fingers around the gently undulating spirit figure floating above the dead body. The young acolyte resumed his consideration on the problems of kite flying. A cord attached a little further back, he pondered, would give a greater angle of attack to the air, and it would climb faster. But if he did that... His deliberations were again interrupted by the words of the Lama. "O liberated spirit," intoned the Lama, "your soul must become alert. Too long have you wilted under the superstitions of the ignorant. I bring you knowledge. The sixth stick of incense is lit to bring you knowledge, for you must know yourself ere starting out on your journey." The acolyte scrabbled frantically on the dim earth floor for the stick which he had just dropped, and muttered an exclamation not taught in the lamasery as his probing fingers encountered the smouldering tinder, and just beyond it the unlit stick. Hastily he ignited it and thrust it in the incense holder. The Lama glanced disapprovingly at him and continued his instruction to the departing spirit. "Your life, from the cradle to the grave, has been enmeshed in superstition and false fears. Know that many of your beliefs are without foundation. Know that many of the devils you fear will haunt you are of your own making. The seventh stick of incense is lit to bind you here, that you may be adequately instructed and prepared for the journey ahead." The acolyte was ready. The incense was lit and left to smolder, and the Lama continued his exhortation and instruction. "We are but the puppets of the one who is higher, put down on earth that he may experience the things of earth. We sense but dimly our immortal birthright, our eternal associations, and sensing so dimly we imagine, we fear, and we rationalize." He ceased and watched the silent cloud figure before him, watched and saw the gradual awakening, the quickening into awareness, sensed the panic, the uncertainty, felt a measure of the dreadful shock from the one torn from his familiar places and things, sensed and understood. The spirit form dipped and swayed. The Lama spoke to it. "Speak with your thoughts. I shall receive those thoughts if you emerge from the stupor of shock. Think that you are able to talk to me." The spirit form pulsed and wavered. Ripples undulated through its length, and then, Like the first faint cheep of a bird newly hatched from the egg, came the wail of a frightened soul. "I am lost in the wilderness," it said. "I am afraid of all the devils who beset me. I fear those who would hale me to the nether regions and burn me or freeze me throughout eternity." The Lama clucked in sympathy and then said, "Spirit affrighted for naught, listen to me. Put aside your needless fears and listen to me. Give me your attention, that I may guide you and bring you solace." "I hear you, holy Lama," the spirit form made rejoinder, "and I will attend upon your words." The Lama nodded to the young acolyte, who thereupon seized a stick of incense. "O affrighted spirit," intoned the Lama, "the 8th stick of incense is lit that you may be guided." The acolyte hastily thrust the smouldering tinder at the incense, and, satisfied with the result, placed it firmly in the holder, leaving one vacancy yet to fill. "Man upon the earth," said the Lama, "is an irrational figure, given to believing that which is not so, in preference to that which is. Man is greatly given to superstition and to false beliefs. You, spirit, fear that devils surround you, yet there are no devils, save those which your thoughts have constructed, and which will vanish as a puff of smoke in a high wind, if you but recognize the truth. About you there are elementals, mindless forms, which but reflect your thoughts of terror, as a still pool will reflect your features as you bend over it. These elementals are mindless. They are but the creatures of the moment, like the thoughts of a drunken man. Have no fear. There is nothing to harm you." The spirit form whimpered with terror and said telepathically, "But I see devils. I see gibbering monsters who poke their taloned hands in my direction. They will devour me. I see the features of those who I have wronged in life, and who now come to exact retribution." But the Lama raised his hands in benediction and said, "Spirit, pay attention to me. Gaze firmly at the worst of your imagined tormentors. Gaze at him sternly, and make the strong thought that he be gone. Visualize him vanishing in a puff of smoke, and he will so vanish, for he exists only in your fevered imagination. Think now, I command you." The spirit form heaved and wavered. Its colors flared through the whole gamut of the spectrum, and then there came the triumphant telepathic shout, "It went! They have gone!" The spirit form wavered, expanded and contracted, just like a man of the earth panting after great exertion. "There is nothing to fear save fear," said the Lama. "If you fear not, then nothing can harm you. Now I will tell you what comes next, and then you must go on the continuing stage of your journey towards the light." The spirit form was now glowing with new colors. Now it was showing confidence and the cessation of fear. Now it waited to know what lay before it. "Now is the time," said the Lama, "for you to continue with your journey. When I release you, you will feel a strong urge to drift. Resist it not. The currents of life will carry you along through swirling clouds of fog. Horrid faces will peer at you through the murk, but fear them not. At your bidding, they will go away. Keep your thoughts pure. Keep your demeanor calm. Soon you will come to a pleasant green sward where you will feel the joy of living. Friendly helpers will come to you and make you welcome. Fear not. Respond to them, for here you cannot meet those who would harm you. The spirit form swayed gently as it considered all these remarks. The Lama continued, Soon they will escort you as friends to the Hall of Memories, that place which is the repository of all knowledge, where every act, either good or bad, ever done by any person, is recorded. At the Hall of Memories you will enter, and you alone will see your life as it was, and as it should have been. You and you alone will judge the success or otherwise of your endeavors. There is no other judgment. There is no hell save that which your guilty conscience will impose upon you. There is no eternal damnation, no torments. If you have failed in your life, then you, and you alone, may decide to return later to the earth life and make another attempt. The Lama stopped and motioned to the acolyte, who thereupon took that last stick of incense. O Spirit, now instructed, said the Lama, go forth upon your journey. Travel in peace. Travel knowing that you have nothing to fear but fear itself. Go forth. Slowly the spirit form rose, paused a moment while the figure took a last look around the room. Then it penetrated the ceiling of the room and vanished from human sight. The Lama and the acolyte rose to their feet, picked up their equipment, and left the room. Later, as the sun was reaching its zenith, a ragged figure approached the little house and entered. Soon he emerged again, carrying upon his back the swathed figure which was the mortal remains of the father of Timon. Along the stony path he trudged, bearing the body to the place whence it would be dismembered and broken, so that the birds of the air, the vultures, could feed upon the remains, and in the fullness of time return the changed remnants of the body to Mother Earth. End of chapter 2.